Hello, everyone. How is everybody tonight? This is Unfound Live for March 3rd of 2025. I hope everybody had a great week. It has been really, really beautiful here in this part of Florida. So that's been nice. And let me fix a couple things here. All right. And these are the days where if you ever question why you're living in Florida, these are the days that answer that question. That it's just been really, really nice. Although I heard we might be having some storms that are coming through maybe on Wednesday or something, but really within the grand scheme of things, those are inconsequential compared to what's been going on with the weather. It's been really, really nice. And I was even out today for the first time, if you can believe this. This is going to blow your minds. For the first time since September. So 5 months ago, for this first time in 5 months, I went out and threw the discs a little bit today. Of course, I've had some things going on in my life, as many of you know. And finally thought it was time to incorporate that back into my daily routine. Of course, many of you remember when this live show would start out, the first thing I would talk about is disc golf. And I haven't really talked about it for quite a while because I haven't been playing, I haven't been competing, I haven't even been practicing. Well, I thought that this week was a good day to start on that. And it felt good to get out. It was the perfect morning to go out there. I was out there about 9 a.m. this morning, maybe 9:30. And perfect weather to do that. Just throwing into the net up here at Sand Key now that park is open. So felt good. And my plan is to start competing in April again. And I haven't played in a disc golf tournament since September. So that's what's a little bit of what went on today. I'll get into the rest of this week here in a moment. As is usually the case, I always want to remind you while you are watching tonight, you got to give this video a thumbs up. You got to subscribe to this channel if you're not yet a YouTube subscriber. Please share this around. Tell your friends and family about this channel. Lots and lots and lots of content here on YouTube, or if maybe you're watching on Facebook, that, of course, we have the Facebook page there and the group. You want to get involved there and join up in those locations. You can support Unfound, patreon.com/Unfound podcast. You can also go to PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound podcast. While you are watching tonight, if you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the super chat button and contribute that way. Or if you're once again watching on YouTube, you can hit the join button and you get some stuff that other people do not get. So what is going on since we all got together a week ago? I'll have you know that if you're wondering about my sleep, this is probably the best week of sleep I've had yet. That doesn't mean that every night was perfect. Certainly not. But it's gotten to the point. There was a time not too long ago, maybe a month ago, maybe a month ago in February, maybe late January, where if I had a bad night sleeping, that would mean I probably got less than 4 hours of sleep. Now it's gotten to the point when I have a bad night, I'm probably at least getting 5 hours of sleep. So there's definitely been an improvement there. And as far as the upper end, so that's like the lower end now. What's the upper end? It's still in the sixes. I would say of the last 7 nights, 4 of them I would say were pretty decent. The kind of sleep like I'm going toward probably 6 hours and 15 minutes, 6.5 hours. But I would like to really see that get to a solid over 7 hours to really start feeling like man, I'm really really well on my way. But surely this past week was the best week I've had of sleep since sometime in November. And that's despite the fact that I'm fighting. I got over the flu, but my allergies are now all kicked in. And so if you hear me coughing during the show tonight, I don't want you to worry too much. If you develop the lung, it's not a lung thing. I've been out. I've been on the treadmill. I've been out riding my bike. I can breathe just fine, but my allergies are kicked in right now. It is that time of year, maybe a little later than usual, maybe, but my allergies are kicked in right now. And one of those things is usually me coughing for no particular reason. And I've talked to you all about my allergies before that I have. It seems as I've gotten older, my allergies have continued to get worse and worse and worse. And it's a combination of food and dust and tree stuff and grass stuff and stuff flying in the air. And this time of year in Florida is the worst time of years for me. So I got over the flu or whatever I had there. That was really, good to get by that. And then immediately went into coughing and because of allergies. But I notice that little by little, like day by day, it's maybe getting like 3% better every day. So I would suspect won't be too long that the coughing like that right there will be behind me as well. What I've also noticed is that, during this time where I've been getting back to some good sleep habits, and I've been, I had these headaches like right in, not really, really bad or anything, but right here in the middle of my head, and I had those during the flu too, those have gone away. Now, granted, when I was coughing, like the middle of last week, like Tuesday, Wednesday, when the allergies were kicking in, I was coughing so hard, I was giving myself a headache. But within the last couple days, that's kind of gone away. So maybe getting back to some normalcy regarding my health, and that would be nice. So I'm feeling better. Something else that went on that was spectacular last week. By the way, I played trivia 3 nights this past week since you saw me last. I played last Tuesday by myself, Wednesday with my team, and then this past Saturday evening back by myself again. And not to brag, but last Tuesday, I went to this place that's not too far south of me. And there were maybe 20 teams. There were like 104 people there, spread out over about 20 teams. I was there by myself, so it was just a team of 1, and I ended up winning. For reals. And it was pretty nice. Made me feel really good. These days, given everything that's gone on over the last 3 months, I need a little bit of a self-esteem booster. And that certainly helped. And nobody was more surprised than I was. And there was no way they could say I was cheating because I was sitting right beside the person running it. I wasn't hiding off in some corner down. It's like a restaurant bar place. I was sitting right beside where the guy was running it, where, he had the he had the speaker and talking and everything. I was sitting right there. And, I wouldn't say I won easily, but I was on my game. I was just really, really on it. And that was pretty nice. And I know maybe some of you who are friends with me on Facebook might have seen the picture that I posted holding the trophy. You do not get to keep that trophy. That's just for picture purposes only. And I got a $30 gift certificate as well. So that was nice. And then on Wednesday, my team, we didn't have that great of a night, to be honest. And I think we came in 4th place. We're still in 1st place overall, but just barely. The second team's right there behind us. And then the 3rd place team's like 130 points behind. So, we got 4 weeks left in this season. Certainly a lot of mistakes can still be made. We can still completely blow it. But really the last couple weeks as far as my team goes, we certainly underperformed. Of course, the 1 week I was not there because of the flu. But we're still in 1st place after what? Has it been like 7 weeks, 6, 7 weeks, something like that, 8 weeks, something like that. And we have 4 weeks to go in the season, and we've never won a season. We've won individual nights, but we've never won a season yet. We missed it by like that much. The end of 2024. So we'll see if we can keep this up. But it's weird, we don't play very well, and we still come in like 4th place out of like 20 some teams and 130 people being there. So that just shows you what kind of team that we have. So there's that. And what else has been going on? Like I said, I've been going to the gym. Been out on my bike at least a couple days, but it's been a little windy here, and I don't like getting out there in the wind in my bike. It's just a little too hard pedaling for me. You should know I don't have like a bike like with the skinny tires that has like 20 some gears. I have like more almost of like a mountain bike type where it's a thicker tire, which means more rolling resistance. And it's probably more of a workout than the other bike rider is getting out there. So I avoid going out and riding the bike when it's windy. So when was the last day that I was out riding the bike? Maybe Friday, but I think I went out twice over the past week. And going to the gym. And so really just trying to get back to as much normalcy as I can. I did have a talk with my sleep therapist this morning. This was a topic among other things. And like they said, the last 7 nights, 4 were pretty good sleep nights. The other 3 were a little choppy, but I really, once again, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth regarding this. But so it's been as normal a week as I've had in a while, since probably November, and that's nice. And of course, and to top everything off, we have a new episode coming out this Friday that I will talk about later, of course, before I close out the show tonight. As far as other things going on, I was actually watched Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. I had that on this evening while I was doing some things. And the other things continue. I did a little singing practice today, did a little guitar practice today. So trying to get in all the things I was doing back there in like September, October, into November, when I kind of got off the rails for whatever reason. So let's see who is in here tonight. Hello, Karen. Karen gets in first. Nephew Charles, what's going on with you? Fishing, hello to you. Everything. Heather, good to see you. Amy, Sarah. Hello, Sarah. Kathy, good to see you. Neighborly, good to see you. D, what's going on with you? And Black Sheep, what's going on with you? Yeah, that's okay. Good evening, Dee Dee. What's going on with you? Travis. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Black Sheep. Thank you, D. Travis says, I listened to your episode on Travis Robertson today. We will be covering the case this Wednesday on locating the lost. Okay, yeah, Travis Robertson was out there hanging out with friends and kind of walked away, right? Right, that happened. That was an Arkansas disappearance that came out, what, episode must have been maybe 2018. Covered that. It's been a while. But I think that's what happened. He was out with some friends at some street party or something like that, and just kind of walked away, never to be seen again. They went back to the car, and he wasn't there. I think that is the circumstances, the general circumstances. I'm sure there's some intricacies and things I've forgotten, but I think that's what happened with Travis, still unsolved. D says to Black Sheep, we need to do a trivia night and make our own trivia questions and have people like Ed and Art. Yeah, I'd be interested in doing a little trivia contest, a live type of thing, D, if you want to get me involved in that. I'm always ready to show off my trivia powers. Hello, Lisa, you're late. Shame on you. Black Sheep doesn't want to do the trivia. Hello, Brian. What's going on? Good evening to you. And Charles says, biking into the wind is a sport in Holland. Well, Holland can keep it, Charlie. They can keep it across the Atlantic Ocean. Fine by me. It's no fun. I mean, it's a great workout, but I'm out there for like 35. I'm not even out there that long, like 35 minutes. And when I'm done, I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Really done. Thanks, Black Sheep. Brian says, Ez was wondering if it's hard to play the guitar. Thought about trying it. Brian, what I would say is I'm just kind of getting back into it. I've always been a musical person, really, with the piano, and then all of my singing that I'm doing. I still continue to do it. I still continue to get better. Still don't know if I'm ready for public consumption though yet. And at least filming something and putting it online for all of you to see or hear. But the guitar, I don't know if I can answer this very good, Brian, because I think that I have a little bit of an advantage in that I played the piano for so many years. And if you read about, you definitely have an advantage if you're going to start playing the guitar if you've played the piano first. Of course, very famously, Eddie Van Halen was a piano player and a drummer before he took up the guitar. I'm not saying I'm going to get to that level, but with the piano, you really learn a lot about chords and scales and how all of the keys kind of fit together because they're right there in front of you for you to see right there on the keyboard. That really helps. Whereas with the guitar, of course, each string can make a variety of different notes. And so it's, even though, the piano is technically a stringing instrument too, hit the keys, the hammer goes up and hits a string. That's where you get the sound. But I am taking, a video course online, very much like with my singing, Brian, that by this guy, Rick Beato, Beato, and he has like a beginner's guitar course. Maybe you want to check that out. I have both an acoustic and an electric guitar, and I kind of go back and forth between them. The acoustic guitar is harder to play in general than an electric guitar is, just so you know. But I enjoy it. I'm not hitting it as hard as I'm hitting the singing, but I'll just kind of sit over there on the couch and there'll be, these things, little chord progressions that I'll go through, and I'll go through like a major scale. And in getting back into it, I try to give it maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day. I'm just kind of chilling out, sitting on the couch. So I would certainly, I think you should try it, Brian. I don't know. I'm just doing it because I have these, guitars, and maybe I should play them. You have to find your own, reasons for doing it. If you think it's something that could be fun, then do it. Travis says, yes, nailed it regarding Travis. Okay. Very good. Do it live, Brian. I did play the trumpet and the drums back in the day. Well, Brian, I may help you out then. Hard for me to say, but as with any, sort of instrument, you can't rush it. It's easy to get frustrated. I've often told people, well, how did you get so good at playing the piano? And I know most of you have never heard me play or seen me play. I have like videos and things I probably could upload from way, 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 way back in the day. But I was a really, really, really good piano player. And people ask me, well, how'd you get good? I say, well, I didn't quit practicing. I would never say that I had any special talents. I don't think I was a prodigy by any means. It helped that I had a mother who was a piano teacher. But the reason I got good is because everybody else quit playing the piano and I didn't. That's the way I've always looked at it. I knew so many people who started piano lessons either with my mother or somebody else, and they don't make the time to practice. They don't like practicing. They get they're not patient with it. They think they're going to become a professional in 6 months and everything. It's just not how it goes, and that's not how it goes for most people. It's how it goes for most people. You need to give it time. And it's just like with my singing, I've been doing that over 2 years, and I'm certainly have a greater range and everything else than I did 2 years ago. But I don't think that I could have gotten to this point that I'm at right now any faster. Now, granted, I've had to take some times off because I've hurt my voice, straining it and everything. But I really think that I've dedicated some good time to it. Maybe not perfect time, but the reason I've improved is because I haven't quit over the last 2 years. So that's what I would tell you, anybody, that you got to get put in the time and you got to look way down the road and not at next week. That's what I would tell you. So other than that, my dad is great. Didn't talk to him today. Actually talked to him for like an hour yesterday. In fact, we were doing trivia. I saved the trivia sheets from when I play, and then I ask him the questions to see how he does. And sometimes he does decently and sometimes not so decently, but we have a good time with that. He always enjoys that. Anything else as far as personal stuff going on? Got the oil changed in my car today. It was due. And I guess that's about it. Saw my brother Brian on Saturday night after I went to trivia, went over to his house and hung out for like an hour. And I have to cherish these moments because, as I've already told you, he and his wife are moving roughly halfway between Tampa and Orlando. They're selling their house and they're buying a smaller place over there that has an attached garage to it where they can keep their big RV. In fact, to even live in this entire, I don't know if you call it complex or it's a huge place. You have to own an RV of a certain size to be able to even be able to buy a place in there. So they'll be able to have their cars there. I think they're going to be selling one of their cars too, by the way. But they'll have the big RV, their 40-foot RV there. It's parked right outside. Their car will be right out there. In contrast to what they have to do now, the RV's parked at a storage place down the street, and this happens to be the storage place where their first RV got flooded. And of course, they have to pay to have it there, on and on and on. And they've been wanting to downsize, I think, for a little while. So that's what they're doing. And also, my brother's wife, Laureen, her brother and his wife also have a place over there that they come down and stay part of the year. So that was also motivation to kind of go over in that direction. Am I taking this personally? No. No, I'm not. But it's just going to be tougher to see my brother Brian now. Instead of him living 20 minutes away, it's going to be more like an hour, over an hour, especially if I have to, drive over there, during the day and have to go right through Tramp, and then it's a lot more than an hour. So Lisa says, I learned to play the mandolin, wow, with online classes, but wasn't any good until I played with other people. Brian says, looks like there's hope for me. Yeah, of course there's hope, Brian. Just got to take it slow. I really, if you don't have a guitar, I really can't give you a recommendation as to whether you want to start with an acoustic or an electric. Of course, you can get an acoustic one pretty cheap, a decent one for pretty cheap. You get an electric one, of course, you got to get the amplifier and all that. So you're going to have more money into it. But electric guitars are easier to play because the strings are closer to the board, and it's just easier on your fingers a little bit. I don't know if anybody realizes that, but that's the situation. All right, let's get to the agenda for tonight. As you can see in the title for the show tonight, I want to talk about the Zizians. And if you've not heard of that, that's a bizarre story. And I want to talk about this brother. I just talked about my brother Brian. A brother killing another brother. Story that's pretty gruesome itself. I'll warn you before I start reading that one, because there are some gruesome details in that. And then we have a Gilgo Beach killer, Rex Horman. We have an update there. And I think I'm going to be getting into some other things maybe before we are done tonight. So I will start. I did put out a poll this week. I haven't been doing that with these hiatus episodes, but I decided to do that this week, being that Teresa Butler's is, at least to the justice system in Missouri, it is considered to be a closed case. I wanted to see what all of you thought about what was the accepted, I don't know how many people accept it, on paper resolution to Teresa's disappearance, in that Melvin Hufford claimed that he went over that night to do drugs with Teresa. She overdosed. She died. He took her away, in the process stealing some things, and then stored her like somewhere where there was a sink in some house somewhere, and then disposed, chopped her up, kind of, it's very gruesome. Did something to her body to make it into small pieces, and then dumped it all out along a road somewhere in the area. That is the story he eventually told the DA. The DA bought it and sentenced him to 10 years in jail. The weird thing is that, although I couldn't find it, I thought that he was already out of jail. Now, this just happened maybe 4 years ago. 5 years ago, so I guess technically he should still be in jail. I don't know if he is or not. But the question in the discussion group on Facebook was, do you believe that story? And overwhelmingly, nobody believed that story. Overwhelming. It wasn't completely 100%, but very close to it. Overwhelmingly, the people in the discussion group who chose to answer the poll stated that, yeah, we're not believing that story at all. Yesterday evening, I did the think tank, and we pretty much came to the same conclusion. There was nobody who believed that this was an overdose situation. Now, there was a little bit of disagreement about some other aspects of the disappearance, but on the topic of Melvin's story, none of us believed it. And then, although I didn't post it, I have written about Teresa's disappearance before, and I myself have never believed that story. And we talk about, you could talk about travesties of justice in regards to Unfound's disappearances. I think for the most part, when we've believed that there's been foul play and people have gone to jail, we can think about Tiffany Johnson, even though she's not been found. Her ex, went to jail, and he's in jail for a very long time. Of course, we could talk about Dennis Bowman, Carlos Rodriguez, some of these other ones, Tyler Norris' ex-wife. All of these people, foul play, going to jail for extended periods of time, if not for the rest of their lives. And of course, even for some of you, think that way about Steve Pankey, fine by me. But we do have at least a couple instances within Unfound's catalog where there have been travesties of justice. And Teresa Butler's case is one of those. I happen to believe, I think that the facts play out that I think that Melvin Hufford and others went over there. Maybe had heard that, maybe knew that Teresa Butler's husband worked at night, and they were thinking they could go over there and, steal the radio out of her Jeep and other things. And she caught them doing that, and Melvin and others were forced to kill her. Maybe they didn't go over there planning that, and maybe that's the reason they didn't leave her behind. They took her. I'm not necessarily saying they went over there planning to kill anybody that night, but I think that she caught them in the act. They realized that she could identify them, and in the spur of the moment, they really didn't know what to do, so they just took her and figure out, well, what are we gonna do now? And I think they finally decided to murder her. And what I'm also saying is, I don't believe that it's very possible that Teresa Butler's body is out there around that area, still in one piece, buried somewhere. That's what's still in my head. And I've thought this for a long time. And, Teresa's disappearance was one that was very, very, very high up on the list of disappearances that I wanted to feature when I started Unfound in 2016. Of course, we ended up doing that in 2017. I had known about her disappearance for a long time, maybe even since around the time that it occurred. And so it was very, very high on my list. Like Jody Husentrut was very high on the list. Of course, we didn't get to that till 2019. But Teresa's was up there, and I was happy to have her friend Amy on. And of course, listening, if you listen to the episode again that came out Friday, you know how highly Amy thought of Teresa. And even though that's not part of the episode, but although I haven't not spoken to Amy recently, we certainly did talk when all of this came out with Melvin Hufford and everything else. And as you would suspect, Amy totally rejects the idea of the story, and that Teresa was doing drugs and everything else. Amy was really, really, and maybe this day, of course, as well, really hurt by what went on there and the DA accepting that story and everything else. So, the way I look at Teresa's disappearance, I think my idea about what happened is still correct. I'm not fazed by what Melvin said. And I continue to believe it was not him by himself. I think he told that story and he's still covering for at least one other person, maybe even more. But I have to admit, there's no way that I could have predicted the way this would go. I mean, if you'd have told me when we featured Teresa's disappearance in 2017 that it would eventually be resolved, but it got resolved this particular way, once again, on paper, I would have been very, very surprised and very disheartened. And I guess I'm still disheartened, being that that's what eventually happened. If you're wondering about another travesty of justice that's been brought up, I've brought this one up before, of course, Angie Arnell. Kind of the same thing where her husband tells a story that just doesn't sound believable. That she fell, she died. She wanted to be buried out in this island on this lake somewhere. Coincidentally, I think that one's also in Missouri. Angie Arnell is also in Missouri, just like Teresa's was. Wow, what a coincidence. And Angie's husband said, yeah, I was taking her out there on this boat, but then her body rolled off the boat into the water, and I dove into the water, and I couldn't find it, and that was that. And eventually, Angie Arnell's husband was charged. I think he took a plea. I think he went to jail for 4 years, and he has been out of jail for a very, very long time, and Angie is still missing. And I think at least some of you remember that Angie's mother died this past year, and she never stopped looking for her daughter. She, of course, never bought that story either. And absolutely one of the saddest stories in all of the 8.5 years of Unfound's existence. Angie Arnell and the way her mother continued to look for her, absolutely one of the saddest. Absolutely. So, although we've certainly got some justice on some disappearances that Unfound is featured, there have been a couple, at least 2 that come to mind, that are on the way, way, way other side of the range. And I'm so embarrassed for our justice system, knowing about how I think, once again, coincidentally, both in Missouri, that that this is what happened. And that Angie Arnell's husband, free man now, and Melvin Hufford, this was not an overdose. He murdered her. He killed her. I'm not saying he went over there planning to do that night, but I'm thinking that he and other people killed her because she caught them in the act. She could identify them, and that they had to make her. Now, why they took her instead of just killing her and leaving her there, my best guess is that they kind of got caught up in the moment. Didn't think they'd get caught. They did. And in the moment, just figured, well, we'll take her with us and then figure it out. And then that's what they decided to do. Very sad. Very, very sad. But when you cover, when you're in this business of featuring disappearances, not every one of them can go the way we want. Not every resolution can be what we want. But it just seems in both of those disappearances for Angie and Teresa that they're so extremely bad and sad about what the justice system did. Brian says he's going to go with the acoustic. All right. You might be able to go to like a pawn shop, Brian, and if you need to really watch your pennies, you could do that. But there's no reason you don't have to spend a lot of money. In fact, I think the acoustic guitar, in fact, my acoustic guitar is sitting right behind me here. I don't think you could see it. I got it new. And I think, I've had it for like maybe 15 years now, something like that. And I got it for like $150 new. It's an Ibanez, nothing fancy, but it stays tuned. I think it has a decent sound to it. Nothing fancy at all. Whereas if you're going to get a decent electric guitar new, you can get some cheap ones. I have an Esquire, which is like a Fender Stratocaster. It's an Esquire Stratocaster. And I think the guitar was like $350, and I forget what the amp was. So it's going to be a little more money. But that's totally up to you. But I have both of them. And I'm glad I didn't spend a lot of money on either of them, because my skills do not deserve, an expensive guitar. There's a little bit of the allergy cough. Amy says, exactly. I don't believe the drug angle personally. All right. So Amy's also rejecting the idea that Teresa overdosed. Brian says, so sad for Teresa. No real justice. Totally true. Rockford. Hello, Rockford. How are you tonight? Rockford says, as discussed in the think tank, which is awesome, by the way, I'm 100% in agreement that Butler wasn't using drugs. I do think, however, that she was targeted and the robbery was an afterthought. Yeah, as you stated. Yeah, that was what Rockford is bringing up. Of course, the think tank, patreon.com/Unfound podcast. If you'd like to be a member over there and get together with us on Saturday or Sunday evenings, but you have to at the $12 a month level. But what Rockford is bringing up, there seemed to be two lines of thought last night regarding Teresa's disappearance. There was like the way I was thinking that, that it was a burglary that turned into a kidnapping. Whereas Rockford, as he is saying, he's thinking that Teresa was actually targeted, maybe because Melvin and others knew she was home by herself. And so they went over there. She was actually the target, and then they decided to steal stuff while they were there. Hard to say which one is right, the way we understand it. Of course, we can't believe Melvin either. So it's just hard. It just is hard to tell. So we had a couple different factions in the think tank, although we didn't have a lot of people in there last night. But on everybody, though, on the other hand, was in agreement that Melva's story was crap. All right, let's move on to some other unfound things. This is what I would call bad news. But I don't think this is the final word on this. But I've talked about these Steve Pankey materials that I've gotten, the discovery materials from the first trial. And as I've told you, I don't know. I've not known exactly what the legality is of making them public. I've had a chance to go through all of them now. They are certainly interesting. But in emailing the lawyer who hadn't heard from him in a while, I hadn't actually had a real conversation with him since back in November. He has kind of led me to believe that at this point, it's probably best not to make them public. I emailed him last week trying to get a final word on it, and then he called me. I didn't know it was him, but he left me a message, and I've not gotten back to him. It was like at the end of last week. But just even though I think I could do a very compelling series regarding those materials and everything. I just don't think at this point we're on 100% solid legal ground, mainly because Steve is still in the process of, he has, what do you call it? Challenge the ruling. What's the word? The word is escaping me right now. One of you will surely type it in the chat. But he is, he's extending it. Of course, wants to see if they can go to a higher court in Colorado to get the judgment overturned that he's guilty. I don't know how he's going to be able to do that. Appealed. Thank you, Lisa. He's appealing the guilty verdict from 2022. And because of that, it's still continuing legal issues. And there's a question as to whether the discovery materials from one of the trials can be released during this. And in fact, when I had my assistant Eric fill out the paperwork to try to get the discovery materials directly from the prosecutor's office in Weld County, Colorado, they would not give them to me. And I think I ended up reading that response last year when we did that right here on this live show, whenever that was. But then, of course, the way I got the materials was from Steve's first lawyer, Tony Viorst, who is in Colorado. And, I got them legally. I mean, he didn't have to send them to me. And, of course, it took a little time for that to happen. But the lawyer who, right here in Florida, who knows about it, and I sent him the material so he could look at them. Right now, it's just legally a question mark. And I'm a little disappointed by that. Rockford says lawyers are such buzzkills, right? Well, yeah. But, and I hate to. That is surely not a real call. I should have this muted anyway. All right. But hopefully one of these days I'll be able to do it. It's just not going to be, I don't think, anytime soon. Because there's a lot of compelling things in there. The fact is that without using any names, and I think I can say, they looked at quite a few people for Janelle's disappearance. I know Rockford. Yeah, if everybody doesn't know, Rockford is a lawyer. So, yeah, that's a joke. He's joking about his own profession. But in the paperwork that I have, Steve Pankey is not even a major player. Not even close. He's not even the number 2 person that they looked at. He's not even the number 3 person. He's not even the number 4 person. He's not even the number 5 person as far as time that investigators in Colorado put into trying to figure out what happened to Janelle Matthews. You should know that. I think I can say that without getting in any trouble. But there's a lot of very interesting comments. People who knew or know the Matthews and everything, that a lot of it didn't get into the trial for whatever reason, either trial. And I've had a chance to read it. And like I said, I hate teasing you. Because I was thinking, well, I think this is going to go the way I want. Well, I guess it's not going to go the way I want, at least for now. But when that changes, all of you will be the first to know. And I realize that some of you, maybe it's not that big of a deal because you think that Steve Pankey killed Janelle Matthews anyway, and what's the point of going through all this material, and it's not going to change anybody's mind. That very well may be the case. But what I would say in reading through the materials is that for me, as you know, I'm a little bit of a doubter regarding all of this. It only caused me in reading it to doubt all of this even more. So, but I'm just not going to be able to do it. I have to listen to what this lawyer has told me. And so that's just the way it is. Yes. And yes, lawyers are buzzkills. They're taking away our fun, but maybe one of these days that'll change. And I haven't written Steve a letter. Maybe that's something I can do tomorrow and mail it to him to let him know that my own lawyer, he says we're a little bit of shaky ground regarding. I can certainly talk about Steve and everything, but regarding the specific contents and names and things that are in those discovery materials, can't do it. All right, moving on. I got to do a new Unfound now. I think it's gotten quite a few views so far. It came out the end of last week, where I looked at the disappearance of 95-year-old Belva Day. I think that she is easily the oldest person who I've featured either on the podcast or on Unfound now. And she went out and never came back. And that was not quite a month ago now in Arkansas. And she and her car are still missing. Yeah, Belva. Yes, Belva Day is her name. What a name, Belva. I didn't even know that was a name. I wonder how you go about getting the first name Belva. I'm wondering if that's a family name. I've never even heard of anybody like famous, like a musician or author, actor, or anything with the first name Belva. So, but that's her name. She went out, 95 years old. As you know, with the Unfound Nows, I just use publicly available material. And I didn't see anything that would have caused me to think that Belva was losing her mind. There was no news out there that she ever went out and got lost before. Very well could be the situation, but there was nothing that I saw regarding that. Whereas if you wanted to maybe draw a comparison, we could look at the disappearance of David Hardy Jr., where, in covering that disappearance for the podcast, that he had gotten lost many times. And surely, I don't mean to be too hard on his family, but David Hardy Jr. should not have been out there driving around. They should have taken his keys, taken his car. I know it's very difficult to do. And all the issues that can pop up from that. And I even think I said this in the Unfound Now for Belva Day. My father has been very, very clear with me that the day that he can't drive anymore or is not allowed to drive or whatever else, I'm not so sure he's going to want to, be around, to be honest. Luckily, he still has his eyesight. As long as he has his hearing aids in, he hears pretty decently. He had his eyes operated on some years ago, and he has, for 88, he has pretty good sight. Not as good as my sight, but pretty good. Certainly good enough to drive and everything. And he's never gotten lost, at least to my knowledge, or anything. And, of course, I talk to him fairly often, and still fairly sharp and sometimes forgets things, but he remembers recent things and everything. So, but, a lot of 88-year-olds aren't like that. In fact, there are a lot of 78-year-olds who aren't even like that. But I know for my dad, the day, he's certainly hoping that I have to be honest, he's certainly hoping that he has a heart attack that kills him or a stroke that kills him, something like that, before he loses his driving privileges. It's kind of where he is, regarding, his status in life at this point. But in a lot of people, as I made the point in the Unfound Now, this is the kind of disappearance like with Belva Day or David Hardy Jr. going to become more and more common. If you're a Gen Xer, born between 1963, 64, and 1978 or 1980, whatever is considered Gen X, going to see a lot of people in the generation ahead of us, so the baby boomers. This is going to be a very common type of disappearance as they get older, as those 62 and 63-year-olds get to 68 and 70 and 75 and 80. And of course, with people are living longer than ever, it's going to start taking up more of that percentage of the disappearance pie. Now, what exactly happened with Belva? It's hard. It's easy just to say, well, she drove off and got lost. The big question is, well, if that's the situation, why hasn't her car been found? Did she get lost and drive into a lake or a river or something? Not only then did she forget where she was and get lost, but then on top of that, drove into somewhere where her car can't be seen. I guess it's possible. I don't know how probable it is. Could it be that she just completely drove out of the state of Arkansas? And, in the neighboring states, they're not even looking for her. They're not even looking for her in, whatever the states are around Arkansas, like Tennessee and Alabama and Mississippi. Are they even looking for her there? Probably not. So is it possible that she met with foul play? Could be, but I think we still have an issue of her car. Is somebody driving around that old Buick LeSabre? Maybe. It's just hard. It's just hard to say right now. And of course, I of course hope that Belva is found alive tonight, tomorrow at the latest. But it is a situation where if her disappearance lasts for a year and it's still unsolved, she and her car are still missing. And I guess I have to think about doing a podcast on her if I can reach someone in her family. Because hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This Friday's disappearance is a previous Unfound Now episode that we're going to go way more deeper into that. But I'll talk to you about that later. Also, for all of you YouTube people and Patreon people, the new Found episode came out where I took a look at the disappearance to discovery of rock musician Philip Taylor Kramer, who was a member of the rock group Iron Butterfly during the 1970s. He was not in the band when they had their biggest hit, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, honey. Don't you know that I love that song? Some of you have probably heard it. He was not a member of the band when that song came out for them in 1969. He joined in the 1970s. And then, but he got a very advanced degree, must have been a very smart guy, but seemingly kind of lost his mind at some point. And he went missing in 1995 and eventually was found in 1999. I go through all of that in the Found episode, but you'd have to be a member on the YouTube channel or be a Patreon member at the $5 a month level to be able to access that. And it was interesting looking at that. And Philip Taylor Kramer had a very interesting life between a rock musician and scientist and all these other things. So it was interesting to look at that and, cover his disappearance to discovery. So please, if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube. Or go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast and sign up at the $5 a month level. D says, 2-year-old little boy missing out of Oregon. His name is Dane Paulson. Thank you for that, D. And D is also reminding us that it's been a year that Sebastian Rogers went missing, and Sebastian Rogers was a disappearance that I looked at on Unfound now as well. Rockford says the older person driving disappearance that throws me for a loop is Milton McQuillan. Yeah, total stumper. One you haven't covered that has perplexed me for years is Patrick Carnes from Elko. Name not familiar to me, Rockford. Which probably means I've not reached out to anybody in his family either. Not ringing a bell. But yeah, Milda McQuillan was an episode from a couple years ago. She was going to see some friends, and eventually her car was found not far from the friend's house, but kind of on this logging road where she shouldn't have been. Milda is still missing, and that disappearance goes way back to the 1970s up there. What was it? Minnesota, Wisconsin, one of those two states. And one more thing regarding Unfound stuff is I had two new talks yesterday. And I think both of those are going to turn into episodes. And so, like I said, kind of getting back into the rhythm of things. I'm going to be supposed to be doing an interview. The interview for this Friday is already done. But supposed to do an interview tomorrow that will come out next Friday. So not, what would that be? Today's the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. So March 14th. So I'm going to be doing an interview tomorrow. So all kind of getting back into the swing of things. Rockford says regarding Patrick Carnes, older fella, a trucker, his dog missing too. Maybe that does ring a bell then. Maybe it does ring a bell, Rockford, now that you're saying that. Is interesting. Round Lake, Minnesota from McQuillan. Okay, thank you. All right, let's get to those items that were in the title for the live show tonight. We're going to start with the Gilgo Beach killer update. Of course, this is the guy Rex Heuermann, Heuermann. These are these bodies that were discovered out there on Long Island. I don't think Marty is with us tonight to kind of chime in with that. Marty lives very close to where all these bodies were found. And Rex Heuermann, I don't got away with it for a while if we're inclined to believe that he killed all these women. But here is the update. The suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer was back in court for another pretrial hearing on Tuesday, during which time prosecutors shared some new information about the man accused of killing 7 women. Prosecutors with Suffolk County District Attorney's Office revealed that Rex Heuermann spent about 4 summers in the 1980s working at Jones Beach, which allowed him to become very familiar with the area where the remains of 6 of his 7 alleged victims were found. This defendant is a serial killer who meticulously and methodically hunted down and murdered 7 women, said D.A. Ray Tierney. The prosecution argued on Tuesday, so last Tuesday, that Heuermann should get one trial for all 7 of those alleged victims after the defense sought to have the case separated into 5 different trials. Judge Tim Mazzei did not rule on the question nor on whether the prosecution's DNA evidence can be used on the case. A California lab's DNA testing, which linked hairs found on the victims of Heuermann, has never before been used in a New York criminal case. But the DA sounded confident the evidence would be allowed in court. This is sound science. It is the future of DNA analysis. The science has been around for many years, and the defense wants to call it magic. That's fine. For Heuermann, his attorney said that the more he's looked at the evidence, the more he's convinced his client is not the killer prosecutors make him out to be. A hearing to contest the admissibility of the evidence was set for March 12th, further delaying the start of the trial. Heuermann was arrested in the summer of 2023. Wow, it's been that long ago. And the case is yet to go before a jury. Heuermann's defense team said their client is being patient as he waits behind bars throughout the process of pretrial hearings because he knows how important the hearings are. He knows the progress of the case or lack thereof, and he doesn't want it rushed. He's holding up okay, looking forward to his day in court. Like all lawyers say. What was determined on Tuesday, the location of the trial. The defense now believes Heuermann should get his day in court in Suffolk County. The residents of Suffolk County who are familiar with what goes on in Suffolk County, we are looking forward to having them sit in that courtroom. I guess you could, the alternative would be, do they need to move it out of the area because of all of the attention that the case has gotten? And everybody maybe reading, watching the news and knowing Rex Heuermann's name and everything else. I guess it sounds to me like his defense team is saying maybe they think that they want people who are familiar with the area to be on the jury, which in my mind, it seems like maybe they're trying some counterintuitive thought here or something. Let's see what everybody is saying. Yes, Milton McQuillan was an older lady. D. She was, I think, in her 70s. Yeah. Kathy Rockford Elko, a jumping off place, huh? Our family visited relatives in Southeast Idaho every year driving from. All right, Kathy filling in, everybody telling her some of her family history there. Okay. What catches my eye in this article is what is said right at the beginning. And that is that Rex Heuermann, to read it again, he spent about 4 summers in the 1980s working at Jones Beach. Was he a lifeguard or something? It doesn't say. Which allowed him to become very familiar with the area where the remains of 6 of his 7 alleged victims were found. This is, of course, I think noteworthy because this furthers the idea, one more little piece of evidence regarding crimes overall, especially when we're talking about disappearances, because we have to remember, for these women who were killed, they were missing people first. These women were not found right away. They were murdered, they were missing for a while, and then they were all kind of discovered over a short period of time. But they were missing. And so what did their killer, if we're to accept that Rex is the killer, what did he do? He put those bodies in an area that was familiar to him. Once again, we have that little, one more anecdotal, I guess at this point, piece of evidence that when we think about disappearances, and we're inclined to think that the disappearance is foul play. Of course, we've covered many that aren't. But I stick by that 60 to 65% number of the disappearances that have been featured on Unfound. 60, 65% of them are foul play. That we should think of in terms of how do we solve them. We should think about the areas that were familiar to whoever we think are the best suspects. Of course, we've had some where we think it's foul play, but we don't have a good suspect. That certainly has happened. Not overtly common in Unfound's catalog of disappearances, but something that is a factor, something you have to consider. But I think most of the time, on those ones where we overwhelmingly think that it was foul play, we can narrow it down to, 1 or 2 suspects probably fairly easily. And so we need to take that to the next step. Well, what are the areas in those people's lives that are familiar to them? Now, you may have to go back some years, like with Rex Heuermann, have to go way back to the 1980s to find a connection between him and where these women were found. Of course, it's Jones Beach, not Gilgo Beach, but my understanding is it's all very close together out there on Long Island. So we need to think about that. And even within Unfound's own catalog of disappearances or murders that have been solved, we have evidence of that. Of course, Dennis Bowman, Andre Bowman, found on the property. Carlos Rodriguez with Zoe Campos. Zoe's remains found on the property where he lived with his family. And it's still a big question on how he did all that. And, his parents really didn't know. It's still a question. We still don't have an answer to that. So we start thinking about these disappearances that we think are murders. Um, it makes all the sense in the world to look at the properties, the private properties of the people we think are the best choices as the killers. Now, what makes this difficult is that there's no proof that maybe these people are dead. We suspect it. I think we have a lot of circumstantial evidence to believe that these people were murdered. They're not alive anymore and they were murdered. But that's not good enough to usually get a search warrant. And I'm convinced. I don't want to put a number on it. I don't want to even say which disappearances that I think are this criteria. But surely, still many of these outstanding unsolved disappearances that we featured on Unfound, that we believe that are foul play, the missing people are surely on the private property of the suspect. The odds overwhelmingly say that. Now, which ones am I talking about? I probably could go through. I don't want to get into that publicly, but I certainly believe that we've covered disappearances, families frustrated, what happened to our loved one, and most likely the mostly probably women were murdered and they're buried right there on the property, and that's not ever going to be proven until the property is sold or something, or the suspect dies and they get access to it. I really believe that. In fact, you could say in a way, this is kind of a, it's kind of variation on a theme when it comes to even non-foul play disappearances. Because what do we find out? That these people run off and they end up collapsing or overdosing or something on private property and police can't get access, or maybe they don't even know to have access. And so it seems even with both non-foul play and foul play disappearances, this whole private property topic continues to come up. You just can't go stomping on there and find something. And there's no law in the United States that says that these people have to let. Of course, no suspect is going to let somebody come on the property and search it. Although that does seem like that's what happened with Carlos Rodriguez, but there was compelling evidence, I think, reason to be on the property. Of course, the police blew it the first time around. But this is something that we all need to keep in mind, that, you know, we're like 360 disappearances into Unfound, and I've convinced myself that a lot of those missing people are on private property, whether no matter if it's foul play or not foul play. It's really crazy. So that's what catches my eye just when it comes to familiar areas. Now, you know, we may have situations where it's like an apartment building where, you know, there's nowhere to bury it. Then, you know, a body. Then we have to start thinking like what we're talking about here with Rex Heuermann. What did he do? He killed these women and took them to a place that was familiar to him from years ago. He doesn't necessarily have control of that area. He may not know how many people go out there on a daily basis or anything, but he knew enough about it, given that he spent a lot of time out there, that he thought that he could put the bodies out there and they wouldn't be found. And guess what? He was right, at least for a little while. I mean, obviously, in the end, if he is the killer, it didn't work out for him, and we're all happy about that. But it did work out for him for a little while. So when we start thinking about disappearances that occurred in apartment complexes where there is no private property, then we have to start thinking about, if there is a suspect, where did that, mostly men, hang out over the course of his life? Did he live somewhere else? Where did he work? What kind of jobs did he have? Were they a job, like, I don't know, what kind of job, did he work as a park ranger or something like that? I mean, that would really, really be obvious. Something like that. We have to start looking at where these suspects had, places they have access to. Maybe not at the time, but maybe in the past that they thought that they could sneak in there and bury a body and get out of there without anybody noticing. And also the body wouldn't be found. I think we're more and more just from all sorts of evidence. I think this is a compelling thought. What else? D is saying they're trying to now say Brian is now saying he's autistic. Regarding who? D. Rockford, Kathy, Elko's about the only town for miles in that point. I lived in Nevada for 13 and a half years. I never did go to Elko. Brian, and any DNA collected at the crime scene is huge to find a suspect most of the time. Yeah. Of course, DNA only works, Brian, is if there's already DNA in the system, whether from that actual person or a family member. Of course, more and more, they're not connecting people directly. So, they get some hair or something, and John Smith's DNA is in the system for something, it automatically is a one-on-one, one-to-one. Like there's no degrees of separation between the DNA collected at the scene and the killer. Of course, what they're doing a lot today is, it's like 6 degrees of separation, like that game about Kevin Bacon, in that they find DNA at the scene that is then connected to somebody who didn't have anything to do with the disappearance or murder. But then that leads them to another person with DNA. And, these people are in the system, maybe because of, like I said, people checking their ancestry and everything. And that is what eventually leads them to the actual killer. And they have to go through 4 or 5 different people's DNA before they get to the actual person they're looking for. And, I'm guessing, I continue to say, I think at some point, some defense attorney is going to challenge the legality of all of that. Rockford, also where drugs are involved, right? For example, Bowman, Daniel Villarreal, Brandon Lawson. Yeah. Yes. Rockford. Yes. Yeah, Bowman, Daniel Villarreal, Brandon Lawson. Of course, Bowman was on private property, although it was an abandoned private property. I'm not even sure who the owner was at that point. Daniel Villarreal, I was just, yesterday, one of the people I talked to yesterday, I actually brought up Daniel Villarreal. Private property, of course, Brandon Lawson. Yeah. All on private property. It's a compelling argument. It's a compelling topic. When we start thinking about, well, how do you solve disappearances? Well, you have to start looking at maybe private property that could be connected to a killer, or you look at private property that was very nearby, that somebody could have walked off, and who is that person that's not giving access to that property? Kathy Rockford from west to east, Reno. Yeah, I've never been in any of those places. I went through Reno once in all my years in Nevada. I never made it up to northern Nevada. Kind of regret it now. Why didn't I ever go up and check out the Little Alien, that place that has an Area 51 theme? I never did any of that. Stupid. Just, regrets. I've had a few. So moving on, let's go. I need to answer this question before I move on. And it comes from Jill. She sent me this question. Was it yesterday? So I'm going to answer that right now. But right now, maybe I also need to make sure that anybody else send me any questions that maybe need answered tonight. Doesn't look like it. Hold on just one moment, just to make sure I don't want to miss any questions that people might have had. I don't think I'm missing any. Just one more moment. Let me check over here, and then I will get to Jill's question. Jill has not asked me a question in a while, and she always asks some really good ones. So I want to make sure I get to it. Nope. All right. Her question is, Jill asks, question for you for the live show tomorrow. When do you think is an appropriate time to withhold information from a community? All right. So I this is this is a topic that, you've heard in at least a few Unfound episodes with guests. You've heard me kind of talk about this before. And I guess kind of the frustration that you can get, that you can acquire, that builds up when, a disappearance is like 30, 40, 50 years old. And, they're still saying, well, it's an ongoing investigation. We're not going to give up any information. Now, I think the reason Jill is asking me this is because she continues, along with one of my assistants behind the scenes, to work on a disappearance. They've been doing a lot regarding a disappearance that occurred in Arizona. And they've run into a lot of roadblocks. They've run into some departments that have been helpful, and they've run into some departments in Arizona that haven't been helpful. And, it's just, Jill, if you're out there, I don't know if you're watching tonight or not. You'll probably, maybe, if you're not, I know you always catch it in the replay. It's a sensitive topic. There is no clear line regarding this. There's so many things that need to be considered. All I would say is that time should be a consideration. And what I mean by that, whether it's a disappearance, whether it's, if it's just an outright murder, of course, we don't necessarily do murders on Unfound where bodies are left behind and there's a murder weapon and everything. We don't do that stuff here. But even for those, for disappearances, and maybe other types of crimes as well. Maybe we could talk about, art theft and bank robberies and everything. I think that at some point, there should be a time limit. There should be. I think for a few reasons. One, at some point, there are statutes of limitations regarding, at least. Of course, there's no statute of limitation in the United States on murder. But on a lot of other things, and of course, on some of the disappearances, although we may think it was murder, we certainly could be wrong that it wasn't murder. And of course, we've covered many disappearances on Unfound where we don't believe foul play occurred at all. And for all of those, I think there should be a time limit. All right, police, you get a certain amount of time. And after that, you have to make it public. And it very well may be that the public can help closing some of these cases out. I do think that the police are too protective of all this. I go back to something that Julia Cowley said in her interactions when she was when she was still working FBI agent. She's retired now. In dealing with a local police department somewhere, that somebody in the police department just out and out said, you know what, we didn't want you to come in because we're afraid the FBI is going to find mistakes that we made. Meaning, let's just say the murder is 20 years old. They're concerned that the FBI is going to come in and figure out this case should have been solved 19 years ago. But it wasn't because of some mistake that the police made that they didn't recognize at the time. It doesn't give you a lot of confidence in law enforcement, I got to tell you. That sounds more like egos and things and not problem solving. So it's just a tough question for me to answer. All I would say is I think there should be a time limit. I don't know what that time limit is. And even Julia Cowley, once again, host of the Consult podcast. Hope you're listening to it over there. She has said that she thinks there should be some sort of time limit and some sort of criteria where at some point these files that police, keep from the public eye are made public. And really, if there was some sort of time limit, I think that this might cause police to work a little harder on some of these cases, knowing that if they don't, the files are going to get out there and maybe give an opportunity for somebody else to solve it. So once again, for the live show, when do you think is an appropriate time to withhold information? Well, from a community, I guess, I guess I'm withholding information right now because of what I talked about earlier in the show tonight regarding the lawyer saying, I don't think that you should make those discovery materials public. I don't think you should do that series right now that you're planning to do because I'm going to listen to my lawyer. I'm going to do that. Sucks, but I'm going to do that. So that's when I think it's the appropriate time. It's just hard for me to answer that question, Jill, because there's so many different types of crimes, so many types of different situations. There certainly are compelling reasons for law enforcement and DA department or whatever to not allow the public to see information, certainly. But I think that we've gotten too crazy with it. After doing this for 8.5 years and 360 disappearances and actually testifying in a trial and everything else, this whole thing about can't release stuff to the public, it's gotten too crazy. And it starts to me to feel more like egos and protecting territory and everything, and not about actually solving cases. This whole thing, we're afraid we're going to release the information and that might ruin, the prosecution of somebody. That's just word. Those are just words. That's just a thought. That's not factual. That's just cliche. That's just a cliche. That some police department started at some point and it spread to every other police department. That's the way I look at it. And we know, unfortunately, most of the disappearances that have been featured on Unfound, with the average age of a disappearance being 22 years old, we know most of them are not being worked on at all. So maybe it's time to give somebody else a shot. Rockford, a lot of bad reasons for not releasing information on old cases. One that's plausible is waiting for technology improvement. I'm all for time limits, though. Of course, feds can't impose it on the states. They certainly can't. So there's certainly appropriate times, Jill. It just depends on what we're talking about. But I would say no matter the kind of crime, that I would like to see an expiration date. Is it 20 years? Is it 30 years? Is it 40 years? Is it 27 years? I don't know what the time is. I don't know if there's even any scientific way to figure that out, what would be best. But let's just say it should be shorter than the average lifespan of a person. So the average woman in the United States lives to be 78 years old. The average guy lives to be 72 years old. It should be shorter than 72 years. And in fact, if we want to just talk about adult years, You become an adult at 18, you live to be 70 something. So that's like 50 years. So let's say that after 50 years, at least no longer than 50 years later, should paperwork be, made public. And even that kind of, if I'm trying to really figure this out kind of logically, even, that's where I am in my head right at the second. But even 50 years sounds like a long time. Lisa, I bet you could share it. If it were a Florida case, Florida shares all their stuff freely. I don't know, Lisa. I don't know. Of course, the Pankey case is in Colorado. I'm here in Florida. My lawyer is here in Florida. Although, he did coincidentally live in Colorado and practice law in Colorado, and I don't want to get too much into that. So, but for right now, that's the best I can answer that, Jill. If you're listening to this, if you'd like to ask me maybe something more specific on that topic, I will, of course, give it another shot. All right, moving on. Let's talk about brother killing brother. Very sad story. I mean, I know that I've talked about killing my brothers, but only figuratively, people. The Preppery Princeton murder suspect accused of ripping out his little brother's eyeball after beating and slashing him to death tried to kill himself inside his jail cell Thursday. Told the Post Friday. Matthew Hurtgen, 31, who wore a suicide vest during a virtual court appearance, that's okay, in the day, tried to hang himself at Mercer County Correction Center, where he's being held on murder charges for the gruesome slay. Hurtgen allegedly beat and stabbed his 26-year-old brother Joseph to death with a golf club and a knife in their family's luxury apartment Saturday night. He's also accused of setting the family cat on fire. It's not funny. Tearing out his brother's eyeball and eating it. Like I said, this was going to be gruesome. The twisted rampage, which has stunned those who knew the well-heeled family, came months after the accused cannibal killer posted chilling poems on Facebook that described blood oozing out of eyes and knives sharpening. Hurtgen also took a selfie with a cat toy a day before the vicious slaughter. The brothers, in addition to their eldest sibling, were standout athletes who grew up in a $1.1 million house. Why do they bring these things about? I mean, like this matters. In Toms River, I've been to Toms River. The murder happened Saturday night at the family home in Michelle Muse Apartments. Officers discovered the grisly scene when the alleged murderer called the cops to report a dead body and fire inside the upscale home off Witherspoon Street. A bloody knife, fork, and plate were found near the victim's body, which led cops to believe Hurtgen consumed the missing organ. A motive behind the alleged killer's spiral into homicidal madness remains unknown. Did at least a little bit of reading on this. Wow. I think the only probably thing more shocking than brothers and sisters killing each other is, parents when they kill their children. Is this drugs? Is this mental illness, or is it both? It's probably, I'm going to guess, a little bit of everything. I mean, it's not going. I'll be really, 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 really surprised if we were to hear that this killer never did any drugs. If this is just straight out mental illness, then that is something. I mean, it happens. I mean, certainly there are people out there who have mental illness, period, and are violent. But this, it just seems like more than that. And it's one of those things. Did the drugs bring on the mental illness? Did the mental illness bring on the drugs? Chicken or the egg, or is it somewhere in between? But I will tell you, I have this written in my notes, that is this a situation? Why did he take it out on his brother? Why is it? Because that was most convenient to him when he kind of lost it? Was that the nearest person to him? Or Was this some kind of thing where the killer had been harboring some kind of dislike or hate for his brother and, didn't have the, was sane enough not to do anything about it. But once, if he got high or he had this mental illness kick in, is that the way it was expressed? Was there something, because this happens, that, you hold resentment against somebody, but you don't want to harm that person because you don't want to go to jail and everything. But then you get drunk, you get high, something goes on, and suddenly that thing that you didn't want to do because you didn't want to go to jail, suddenly you're doing it. You are harming a person. And I think that given that we have so much crime and violence in the United States, we do realize that there are a lot of crimes, violent crimes, that would not be committed if people weren't drunk, if they weren't on drugs. And I think this is one of many, many compelling reasons why United States needs to get a really handle on it, big time handle on it. It's an addiction issue that I think that if we could get this under control, not only would these people be better off for themselves, but I think that that would have a drastic drop in crime as well. And even though I admit it seems, according to the statistics, that violent crime per 100,000 people continues to drop in the United States, going way back to when, 50 years ago when I was a little kid. But I have to think that if we didn't have this, growing addiction issue, that those numbers would have dropped a lot further. A lot further. But we have a drug addiction issue, both legal and illegal, and then compounded by a mental illness issue. And it's just, it's just hard for me to say. I just didn't find anything enough about the interaction between these two brothers. Were they close? Were they at odds with each other? Is this something that came out of a fight? And I have it in my notes that, the victim, the other brother, the victim, not the killer, but the victim, was he aware that of all of this? Was he aware that his brother might have a mental illness? Was he aware maybe that his brother maybe had an addiction or was doing drugs that could make him violent? Was this, had the other brother, the killer, ever made any threats toward his brother? Had they had a history of fighting? I don't know. I don't know any of this. But these are all things that come to mind when I read this story. I think what I'm also saying is I'm going to doubt this is the first time this guy has been violent. Oh, I guess maybe he hasn't killed anybody else. But I wonder if he had some sort of reputation. And maybe it very well could be that the brother who ended up being the victim was trying to help his brother out. We know this happens. You try to help a person out like this, and in the end, the person who's trying to help is the one who ends up being the victim. Common. But yeah, but particularly weird, the eating of an eyeball and everything. I don't even like saying it. I mean, I don't even like bringing it up. You should know I have a very weak stomach for this stuff, and it's kind of the reason I'm glad that that Unfound is a missing persons program and a not a murder podcast. Because I will even admit, for going back to the Consult podcast, they do talk about murder there, and they talk about the weapon, and they talk about blood, and they talk about how the body was left and everything. I got to admit, I don't think I could do that every week. I think I'm very fortunate, at least for myself, that we rarely are talking about any sort of blood or anything like that. Because I have a very weak stomach. I don't like needles. Even after all these years of giving blood, I don't like going to do that. Although I've never fainted yet, but still, I have a very weak stomach. So even just reading this article, and maybe also because I have a very vivid imagination, you start talking about these things, and I see these things like very clearly, and it's just kind of disturbing. But it's a very sad situation. But I certainly would like to know some of the background of the killer and how these brothers got along and everything. I mean, it'd certainly be something if they were like best friends and he just up and killed his brother. Yeah, Amy, I know. Brian, what a disturbed person. Definitely not all there mentally. Yeah. Rockford just brings to mind Mandy Stokes' case from my former neck of the woods. Yeah, San Francisco. Oakland brother was on drugs, and he's the leading suspect. He is. For the record, I don't think he did it, but I see why he's number one. Yeah, and I think he's deceased now, Rockford, if you didn't know. Mandy Stokes' brother, I think, is dead now. So, were there any previous red flags regarding these brothers? I just don't know. Brian, I read a couple different articles and I just didn't see anything. This article, the story is fairly new. My guess is that will all eventually come out just because of this was kind of a national story and people are going to want to know, why would a brother kill a brother and do this and kill the cat and the eyeball and everything else? I'm sure that's going to eventually be out there somewhere if it's not out there already, Brian. But getting back to Mandy Stokes, yeah. She was there. She's on the phone. Phone gets cut off. She's talking to her boyfriend who's way across the United States. He's not a suspect. And she said that she was like driving around outside of her apartment. Phone goes dead. And then her car is found down the street. And somebody did say that she and her brother were arguing or something. Very well could be. You don't like, you don't like to think of it in those terms, but that is, it's, I don't know how many disappearances we featured where a sibling is the suspect. That may be the only one, Rockford, out of all 300 some. Very well could be. Let's move on to this. Let's talk about the Zizians. Have you heard of them? I mean, this is another bizarre story. The Zizian, Zizians. Around 9 p.m. on July, this is a very long article. I'm probably going to have to skip over some parts. Around 9 p.m. on January 12th, 2023, so over 2 years ago, a pair of Pennsylvania state troopers showed up at a hotel near the Philadelphia airport. 10 days earlier, a married couple, Richard and Arita Zajko, had been found shot dead inside their home in Chester Heights, a well-to-do Philly suburb. The troopers arrived at the hotel in search of the murder weapon. They had a search warrant targeting a person close to the Zajkos, their own daughter, Michelle. So just before talking about brother killing brother, now we're talking about her daughter possibly killing her parents. The troopers found Michelle Zajko, then 30, and brought her to the barracks for questioning, but she refused to cooperate and was allowed to leave. Then something strange happened. Troopers told Zajko to wait in the lobby so they could return her car. She left instead, leaving behind her vehicle and $40,000 in cash inside of it. The murder case of the Zajkos went cold for years, but it gained renewed attention in January, so just here in 2025. After prosecutors linked a person of interest in the killing, now known to be Zajko, to other suspects in violent crimes in California and Vermont, people who are members of a cult-like group of highly educated AI, artificial intelligence obsessed vegans known as the Zizians. Zajka's whereabouts had remained a mystery after she fled the state police barracks, but last month she and 2 associates who had been questioned in the killing of her parents were arrested in Maryland on trespassing and weapons charges. The trio were ordered to remain behind bars after a prosecutor said in court that they were a part of a group tied to multiple homicides that have occurred across the United States. Neither Zajko nor anyone else has been charged in her parents' murder, but family and friends say they now have hope for the first time there will be a break in the case. Hopefully, there will finally be justice for Rich and Rita, said a family friend. The Zajkos lived in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. Michelle was their only child. She was adopted as a baby. I'm adopted. And raised at the home in Chester Heights. She went and studied biology. Eventually got her master's degree at Temple. She was a high-achieving student with lofty goals. Michelle worked as a research intern at a children's hospital. She also interned at NASA's Ames Research Center in California, studying how space flight stresses the human body. She told a college newspaper, "I want to help save people for my career." Her parents owned several units in development in the nearby town of Aston. And so we'll move down the talk. So it's a shocking crime. Investigators determined that the Zajkas were killed on New Year's Eve of 2022, the same day Michelle turned 30. Rita had a gunshot to the back of the head, and Richard had taken a bullet to his right hand and another to his right temple. Their bodies were discovered in an upstairs bedroom. No gun was found at the scene, but there were 2 9mm shell casings, each bearing a stamped impression of 9mm Luger plus P SIG. Plus P is like a hotter load of 9mm, meaning the bullet comes out faster. 3 days later, investigators of the Vermont and Pennsylvania State Police traveled to Michelle Zajko's home in Country Vermont. Zajko confirmed to the investigators that she owned a firearm, a semi-automatic handgun that holds 9mm type ammunition. She allowed the investigators to hold the gun, but they didn't have a warrant to seize it. In handling and observing said firearm, it was found to be free of dust, dirt, or debris, appearing to be well kept and recently cleaned or serviced. Zajko told reporters that she was in Vermont in the days before and after New Year's Eve, the affidavit says, and that she had not spoken to her parents since January of 2022. So she's claiming that when her parents got murdered, she was nowhere in the area. The investigators later learned that Zajko had purchased the gun at a local sporting goods store, along with the ammunition. They sought a search warrant for the gun and ammunition that they believed was still inside Zajko's home, but on the day it was filed, January 12th, 2023, Zajko was actually in Pennsylvania for her parents' funeral. That's when PA state troopers carrying a separate search warrant went to the Candlewood Suites Hotel in pursuit of Zajko and her gun. There was no gun or ammunition inside Zajko's room, but after she allegedly bolted from the Pennsylvania State Police barracks, troopers returned to the hotel and found the gun in a room where 2 of her associates were staying. The investigators tried to reach Zajko again, but had no luck. She was at that point in the wind. She ran off. Here she's getting questioned about her parents' murders, and she runs off. But those 2 murders are just 2 of 6 deaths in 3 states. 2 years passed with no developments in the case. Then on January 20th of this year, 2025, a Border Patrol agent, David Mayland, was killed in a gun battle in northern Vermont. The shooting broke out after Mayland and other agents pulled over a car that was occupied by 2 people, Ophelia Buckholt and Teresa Youngblood. Not Youngblood, Youngblood, B-L-U-T. Federal prosecutors say Youngblood opened fire after she got out of the car, prompting at least 1 agent to shoot back. Buckholt was fatally shot as she attempted to draw a gun. Youngblood was also shot but survived. Prosecutors have not disclosed the motive in the shooting. They have also not made clear whether Mayland was struck by one of the bullets fired by Youngblood or by one of his fellow agents. Youngblood has pleaded not guilty to 2 federal weapons charges. Vermont prosecutors said the person who provided the guns used by Youngblood and Buckholt was a person of interest in the double murder in Pennsylvania of the Zajkos. ATF later said that person was Zajko. She was charged last month with lying to a gun dealer by providing a false address at the time of the buys. The leader of this group is believed to be an Alaskan computer scientist and blogger named Jack Ziz Lasota. According to people familiar with the group, Lasota was one of the two other people questioned in the Zadko's murder, along with a former housemate of Michelle Zadko's, Daniel Blank. The Lasota and Blank were also staying at the same Philadelphia area hotel where state troopers had executed a search warrant following the Zadko's murder. Lasota, who identifies as female, spent 5 months in jail after she was charged with obstructing the investigation. After she was released on bail, she failed to show up in court, prompting the judge to issue a bench warrant. The whereabouts of the three were unknown until last month. So on February 16th, so just a couple weeks ago, a man in western Maryland town of Frostburg called police to report 3 suspicious people on his property. They had arrived in box trucks and were wearing all black. Charging documents say that when police arrived, they found Zadko, of course, the woman whose parents were murdered, and Lasota in one of the trucks, both wearing gun belts with ammunition. Zadko refused to put her hands behind her back and was forcibly taken to the ground. In Zadko's waistband, the officers found a handgun. She was charged with trespassing along with obstruction and weapons offenses. But back in Pennsylvania, friends of the Zadko's have long wondered why they were murdered. But here's the interesting part regarding these other murders. I'm going to read this to you. This is from, there's actually a Wikipedia page for the Zizians. They were trying to start some separatist society. They bought a tugboat in Alaska and drove it or sailed it. I don't know how you even want to put it. Drove it to Vallejo, California. No, they drove it to California and then they moved themselves into a lot in Vallejo, California. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the group stopped paying rent to the landowner, Curtis Lind, L-I-N-D. Group members also began placing locks on trailers meant for other tenants. When Lind took the group to court for back rent, one member brandished a knife, causing Lind to start carrying a pistol. On November 15th of 2022, Lind, then 80, was attacked by a group of people after being called in to fix a water leak. He was struck in the head, stabbed through the chest with a sword, and stabbed in his right eye, leaving him blind in that eye, but survived and fatally shot one of his attackers, 31-year-old Emma Borhanian, and injured another. This is all part of the Zizian cult. They had been arrested along with Lasota at the 2019 CFAR protest. 2 of Lind's alleged attackers were charged with Borhanian's murder due to their actions precipitating Lind's self-defense under California's felony murder rule. Lasota was contacted by police during the incident but was not charged. Well, here's the big part. On January 17th of 2025, so just 2 months ago, 3 days before the shootout that got this officer killed, Lind, the landowner in California, was stabbed to death and had his throat slit outside his gated property in Vallejo. Why? Because he was expected to be an important murder in Borhanian's murder trial. Prosecutors charged 22-year-old data scientist Maximilian Snyder with Lind's murder. Youngblood had attended high school with Snyder, because she's the one that got into the shootout in Vermont where the officer got killed, and had recently applied for a marriage license to marry him. Snyder dictated to reporters a statement addressed to Eliezer Yudkowsky, calling himself a student of Yudkowsky who had become disillusioned with him. Lasota was arrested in Maryland in February 2025. She is being held in custody without bail. She requested a pretrial release, with which a local judge denied. You can't make this stuff up, right? An AI-obsessed vegan cult who seemingly have murdered 6 people, including one of the members' own parents. In addition, they murdered a guy who was going to be a witness in a trial against them. Something. What's everybody saying? Rockford, maybe he's innocent, but not my opinion since he drained her bank account. Oh, yeah, and Mandy Stokes' brother. Jill, I answered your question about a half hour ago regarding withholding information. Rockford, Kathy agreed it doesn't look great for him. Too long to cover here, but a few things point me away from him. Also, her state of mind. Also, Oakland. Rockford, I always said that tugboats are the gateway to separatism. Yeah. Yeah, they went up there, bought this. They were going to live on this tugboat or something, kind of a, one of these free state or separate state type of things. And they got it. They sailed it to California, but then they move on to this property, end up killing their landlord. It is a jungle out there, but you can't make this stuff up, right? You can't make it up. So the Zizians, there's a lot more on them if you want to read about them at Wikipedia. Like I said, they have their own Wikipedia page, and it details all of their crimes of the 6 murders and everything else. But this is all, it seems like this has seemingly been brewing for a while. They've been murdering people for a while. This woman's parents were murdered back in 2022. So they're out there. They are out there. And I wonder if this is all these people named in that article are all the people who are in this cult. Maybe it's a lot bigger than that. I don't know. So we got 4 minutes left. Doesn't look like I'm going to get to, I ran out of time, but I had this story about, did you hear about this sports reporter? Was he from Mexico? I think he was from Puerto Rico, who went to New Orleans for the Super Bowl and got drugged and died. And the woman who drugged him stole all his stuff and used his credit cards and everything. Maybe you've heard that story, maybe not. I'm just not going to have time to go through Super Bowl death. His name's Aiden Manzano, Manzano. He was a reporter for Telemundo in Kansas City. I guess it wasn't Puerto Rico, but I knew it had something to do with a Spanish station or something. But yeah, he went there, seemingly got hooked up with a prostitute, something. She drugged him, took all his stuff, but he died in the process. I don't think, well, I guess he was murdered, but it wasn't like he was stabbed or anything. It seems like he died from whatever she gave him, and she has a reputation of doing this. She's been caught doing this before, but these other guys didn't die. So you want to look that up, you can. Let's go to this Friday's episode. First new episode in a while. Going to be covering the disappearance of Wendy Guessing. Some of you may remember that this was an Unfound Now episode going back to 2021. This is the woman in her early 50s who was working at her boyfriend's pizza shop. And just up right in the middle of the workday, around 4 o'clock, allegedly she got a call. We're not sure if it was on her cell phone or actually on the phone at the pizza place. But she said, I got to go pick somebody up. She left, got in her car. It technically was not her car. It was her boyfriend's car. And she never came back. And she went missing. This happened June 12th of 2021. This happened in Crest Hill, Illinois. But what I found out in doing the interview that you will hear this Friday, actually the car was eventually found. And her phone was eventually found, but it was not in the car. In fact, the phone was nowhere near where the car was found. In addition, you will hear about how there was a surveillance picture from a local hotel that was taken of Wendy after she went missing. Not like a week later, but a day later, 2 days later. So it does seem that after she left the pizza place that day, that she was still around. But eventually, the car she was driving, it was her boyfriend's car, was eventually found in a different city. The phone was found in another different city, and Wendy is still missing. And I might have even said when I did that Unfound now that, man, this is one of those that I hope we could, if, of course, if it's not solved first, they could eventually become a regular episode. Well, I am making that happen on Friday. Her sister, Sarah, is the guest, and Sarah did a really, really good job. I interviewed her on, when was it? It seems like it was Saturday, or when was it? It was February 27th. So last Thursday is when I interviewed her. What's everybody saying here? Rock, Gav, the only other thought I had about Mandy. All right, so you're talking about Mandy. Agree, probably not random. All right, you two are still talking about Mandy Stokes. You can continue talking there, but it is now 11 o'clock, so I'm wrapping this show up for tonight for March 3rd of 2025. So once again, this Friday, Wendy Gessing, Gessing. She's not on the Charlie Project. However, she is listed on NamUs. Her sister Sarah is the guest. This will be the first new episode that we've had in a while, and hopefully I can keep that up. So that's it. Everybody keep your heads on swivels out there. Keep aware of your surroundings. Do not be victims. Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. Good to see all of you tonight. And we're going to do a new episode on Friday. Good night.